What makes a team go from average to elite? It's not always the quarterback, even though that's what you would think. I mean, it is a quarterback-driven league, so it is a little bit of the quarterback. And it is a little bit of the GM, but sometimes I think a lot of the weight falls on the guy who's calling the plays. So let's talk about how a great offensive coordinator can be the secret weapon in today's NFL. But before we do that, we got to set the stage. We got to think about these offensive coordinators other than just old men. These are the architects, man. They don't just call plays. They design entire systems. They find mismatches. They dictate tempo. They manipulate defenses. And when they're on, they're freaking on, man. They turn mid-tier talent into production machines, and they elevate stars into MVPs. So what we're going to do now is take a look at some of the best OCs in the league right now and kind of see the impact that they've had in the NFL. So we're going to start going all the way to the Bay, looking at the man himself, the myth, the legend, Kyle Shanahan, the dude who's the master of motion and misdirection. Shanahan's offenses with the 49ers have been just a rolling machine. They've ranked top 5 in EPA per play multiple times since 2019. He's turned late-round picks and journeymen into weapons. I mean, think how he's had an effect on Brock Purdy, who is Mr. Irrelevant. That means he was the last pick in the draft. He led one of the NFL's most efficient offenses with that as your quarterback. Why? Because Shanahan schemes throws open. He schemes throws open. He plays to players' strengths, and then he also makes life easier on his quarterbacks. I'm not saying Brock Purdy couldn't have been a good quarterback, but he would not be at the level where he's at now if it wasn't with help of Kyle Shanahan, right? It's like a perfect marriage there. Now, let's move over to the Midwest, and let's take a look at the Bears head coach right now, previous Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Before Ben Johnson got there, the Lions were irrelevant. Let's be real. Lions were the laughingstock of the NFL. We know the Lions as just being typical Lions, never winning games, multiple seasons of going 0-16. That's the Lions. But once Johnson took over play calling in 2022, Detroit jumped to 5th in total offense and 4th in scoring, which is crazy. Top 5 in anything for the Lions. You wouldn't have believed that way back then. He took Jared Goff, who some had viewed as a cast-off since he got traded to Detroit in the Stafford trade, and he took him to be a top 10 quarterback based off most metrics. Like, he built that by tailoring to Goff's comfort zones and his strengths, utilizing the wide zone running offense and then building off play action off of that. And then the result was that Detroit's offense just became one of the most fun and dangerous in the league. And you can't mention Ben Johnson with all the trick plays that he's brought into the NFL at this point too. Like, just a crazy creative mastermind. Now we go back over to the West Coast because we're going to take a look at Sean McVay, who was, at the time when he got hired, the youngest head coach hired. But since his time, he's already been one of the most influential in the NFL. McVay transformed the Rams overnight when he arrived there in 2017. I mean, he turned them from a league worst offense into a top-scoring unit in literally one season. His system emphasized condensed formations, wide zone runs, and play-action rollouts, helping Jared Goff's benefited from 2 great offensive coordinators, but he helped Jared Goff reach a Super Bowl. They didn't win it, but they got there. But McVay's ability to change things up showed again in 2021, where he was able to craft a different shotgun-heavy approach that elevated Stafford to hosting the Lombardi. I mean, his offensive vision and flexibility have just become a major blueprint across the NFL. But none of these guys probably come to fruition if it wasn't for the OG, the gold standard himself, Andy Reid. What Reid has done with Patrick Mahomes isn't just about Mahomes being special, which he is. I'm not taking any credit away from Mahomes. I mean, his track record right now has him going to be the greatest of all time. But Reid has implemented a lot that has helped impact Patrick Mahomes positively with creating spacing in his offense, laying route concepts, and always staying one step ahead. I mean, if you go back a couple Super Bowls ago when the Chiefs faced the Eagles, they were able to embarrass them with motion in that Super Bowl. That was Reid knowing exactly how to manipulate those coverage rules, and even in down years, right? His offense still remains top 10 when you're looking at DVOA as a metric. And most advanced metrics. I don't think you need me to convince you that Andy Reid's offense with Patrick Mahomes has just been dominant year after year. It's been down lately, but there's still been top 10 almost every year. Now, we got to take a look at a newer offensive coordinator that's kind of, made his mark, and that's Mike Daniel out of Miami. And Mike McDaniel. Now, I want to talk about him because his rise is a proof of just how powerful unique offensive minds can be. When he took over in Miami, the Dolphins hadn't had a top 10 offense in like 15 plus years, but by 2023, they led the league in total yards. They finished top 3 in scoring, and that was for most of the season. And he did this a lot by using a lot of motion at snap. I think he had the most motion at snap than anyone in the league. Layered speed threats like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And then he did ultra quick release, which really benefited Tua and helped kind of revitalize his career. So basically, the Dolphins weren't just fast. They were very surgical, and that had Mike McDaniel's fingerprints all over it. But another thing about these offensive coordinators isn't necessarily just their scheming and just their play calling. It's actually the importance of having the same offensive voice year after year. You know, when these teams consistently change offensive coordinators, players can't get comfortable, timing breaks down, language shifts. It's like you have to learn a whole new language. I mean, just look at Baker Mayfield's first 4 years in the NFL. You could see why they weren't that great because he had 4 different play callers in 4 years. You can't expect any QB to grow in that chaos. Like, that's like getting a new teacher every year for the same subject and they teaching in different ways. Like that, it doesn't mean you can't pick it up, but you're definitely behind the 8 ball on that. And then you compare that to the opposite, like Patrick Mahomes, who had Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy for years. Like, stability fostered dominance. Does not say that Patrick Mahomes still wouldn't have been great, but it does help that a lot of the, dice rolled in his favor. Now, I want to do a little bit of a flashback. I want to show the importance of an offensive coordinator, particularly once they leave. And we're going to go back to the 2016 Falcons. So Dan Quinn was the head coach, but everyone remembers that team for Kyle Shanahan's offense. And you look after 2016, once Kyle Shanahan left to become the head coach of San Fran, that same roster never came close to replicating any of his success. Quinn didn't change, but the offensive coordinator did. And that shows you exactly where the magic was happening, and it was being cooked through the eyes of Kyle Shanahan. And you know what? You saw that basically the Falcons were never the same, and Dan Quinn ended up actually getting fired. I don't know if he resigned or fired, but he ended up not being the head coach anymore, and that's just due to the subtraction of Kyle Shanahan. But I also want to show this isn't just a modern thing with the NFL. It's definitely more important now because I think the NFL has definitely become very offensive friendly. But if we go back and look at like the early 90s Cowboys and we rewind a little bit, you'll see that the Cowboys dynasty during that time, like, they were really good. And you see that Jimmy Johnson gets all the credit. But like Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irving, they got the spotlight too. But really the mastermind behind all this was Norv Turner. Like, he was the offensive brain behind it. He simplified reads for Aikman. He built an offense around the line in Emmett, and he let Irvin dominate on one-on-one situations. And because of that, they won 2 Super Bowls with him calling plays. And when he left, the offense took a noticeable dip. So, before we move on to the end of this episode, I want to ask you, if you could steal one offensive coordinator for your team, Reid, Shanahan, McVay, Ben Johnson, who are you taking? Let me know in the comments which one of those guys you'll take. Okay, so another underrated aspect of these offensive coordinators is that good coordinators are able to protect bad offensive lines. And in the NFL, it is hard to find good offensive lines. Like, players get injured all the time. There's definitely a scarcity at the position. So being able to help utilize that weakness is huge. And they do this by helping QBs get the ball out fast. They take pressure off young players. I mean, if we're going back to Mike McDaniel again as an example, he had Tua throwing at the fastest time to throw in the league, and the Fins still had a top 3 offense in 2023 despite multiple offensive line injuries. Okay, so we know that there's a major impact with these offensive coordinators, but it's not just what they do. It's kind of the ripple effect that's happening in the NFL now. And you hear the term thrown around, the coaching tree. So you'll hear the McVay or the Shanahan tree. And really what that is a lot of these offensive brilliant minds worked with Shanahan or McVay, and they bring along some of the same qualities or same methodologies or schemes with them. And a lot of these guys are getting head coach opportunities before other guys, and they're getting offensive coordinator opportunities before other guys. But I do want to caveat, just because you come from the Shanahan and McVay tree does not mean that you're automatically going to work out. That is not how that works. Everyone is not a Shanahan. Everyone's not a Shanahan or McVay for a reason. That's why those guys are the OGs and the GOATs. But it does help. It gives you a step ahead, and you see a lot of NFL teams taking a risk with these guys. Now, I already mentioned this earlier with looking at Shanahan when he left the Falcons, but I also want to take a look at another example of when a good coordinator left. And that's at Baltimore with Gary Kubiak when he left in 2015. When he was the OC for the Ravens back then, they were top 8 in yards and top 12 in points with the highly efficient Joe Flacco, which is crazy that he's still in the league. Like, shout out to him. That's crazy. But the next season, they literally tumbled to 25th in scoring. Like, the structure, the balance, and the zone run concepts that Gary Kubiak had brought, they all vanished, and so did the offensive consistency. So that basically just says, like, a bad OC doesn't just stall drives, they stall careers, and they can literally end, a team's chance for the playoffs, for the Super Bowl, just like that. And the example I gave before, I just want to reiterate it here, is we're talking about when the Falcons lost Kyle Shanahan in 2017. In 2016, the offense was historic. 34 points per game, top 2 in DVOA metrics, and Matt Ryan won the MVP. Literally the very next year, once Kyle had left, they dropped almost 12 points per game, and then Matt Ryan never reached those heights again. And that just shows that Shanahan's departure exposed just how vital his scheme and his play calling was to Atlanta's success. All right, so another question for you here. Which current offensive coordinators do you think is flying under the radar? And who do you think is next in line to become the next great play caller? We know, like, the most recent one was Ben Johnson, but let me know what next play caller do you think is going to rise as that next hot candidate. Go ahead and drop those in the comments. Okay, so we're going to end it here. I just want to let you know, in today's NFL, scheme is king. And these offensive coordinators these guys are designing the schemes. Like I said, they are architects. They might be even more valuable than the stars on the field, right? I just don't want you guys to sleep on the coordinators. I understand players are important, quarterbacks important, wide receivers important, all that's important. But if you don't have a great coach putting these players in the best position for them to thrive, I mean, how good are the players really? Like, these coordinators are the real puppet masters behind the highlight reels. So my final question to y'all is coaching the most underrated factor in the NFL? Like, or do you think it's players that matter more? Drop your take below. And if you want more content like this, daily content where I go over NFL news, some takes I have, some observations I have around the league, please like and subscribe so that you can get more of this content and it can pop up on your feed. I appreciate it. Hoping to have a new video out tomorrow. Hopefully y'all have a blessed day. I'm out. Peace.